let us call this meeting to order.
Right.
Excellent.
All right. Well, this is why I don't like being in charge. I don't like to have to decide what to do. Has anyone?
I think we need to start voting on some of this budget stuff so we can get going. And from the grapevine, I hear Barry wants this budget in the town report. What do you all feel about that?
I feel like I want to make some broad, overreaching decisions before we vote individual lines. Like, I think we should decide on a percentage we want to say we're going to reduce revenues and go and kind of see where we're going from there. What are others' thoughts on that?
A percentage we're going to reduce revenues, or?
Well, I'm just, I mean, we have three different, we have our 10%, 20%.
Sort of forecast what we think revenues are going to be.
Yeah, I mean, we have our three scenarios, and depending on how pessimistic we think we want to be, then I think that is what helps us drive what we're going to do for expenses.
Yeah, I mean, since we have to have a balanced budget, that if we can say what we expect the revenue side to be, then the expense side will follow.
Yeah, I mean, if we do that and it looks like, you know, it's too draconian or whatever, I mean, it's really just it's a shot in the dark as to what we think these local receipts are going to be, and state money. And Margaret wants to say something.
I do. The administrative finance team went through all the revenue lines to scrub what we're seeing with the state, what we're seeing with actuals here. I don't know that I would recommend just arbitrarily picking a percent reduction. I think that we really need to use whatever strategy whatever information we do have available to make reductions. That's just my recommendation to FinCom.
So Margaret, do you have a current projection of what you expect revenues to be?
Yes, it's the one that I gave. It's the one that we gave last week. So it's that sheet where we scrubbed all of those local receipts, and local receipts and state aid, and reduced by about $148, little over $148,000.
That means I have to find it, huh? Oh, which folder is that in? Okay.
Well, and I'm fine with that, Margaret. I guess that's why. I guess I'm just saying I think we should start with revenue, and I'm not saying that I was disagreeing with those numbers. I was basically saying that I think we should start with revenue.
Yes, if you scroll up, Mike. If you scroll up, up.
Up. The other up.
I'm not scrolling.
Oh,
Somebody
who's
else
doing this?
Somebody else is doing that. It's not me.
Okay, tell you what, I can do it if whoever's doing it. If you want to just if you want to
Mary is sharing her screen with us.
All right, so let me just give me a second here to open this up, and I can try to walk you through it then, and I'll share this one. Okay, here we go. All right.
Margaret, didn't you just send us one today?
One what?
A new budget? Is it not the one you?
No, it's that I had shared with you, I had emailed you the PDF of the budget spreadsheet, and then I followed up, I think it was yesterday, with the actual Excel spreadsheet I sent you.
It says so anyway, recommendations 5/4/2020 is what I'm looking at.
Yep.
That's the right one, right?
That's what this one says.
I thought it came in today.
So this is the column. So folks, this is the column that we went through, I don't know, your last meeting or whatever. And we explained in a summary sheet what was behind, why we derived, how those were derived. And so that's That's what we have.
Ah,
Could they still change? Sure, they could still change. But we, at this point, are trying to be as conservative as possible, identifying those lines that we feel are going to be the lines that are going to experience the greatest impact. So you've got that reduction right there of $148,141. And those reductions are shown in more detail on this sheet right here, the draft income one year ladder. So right here, you can
So
see
Margaret,
about,
that leaves the net of 14,308. Correct?
that's correct, right, Mike? Yes,
Okay.
that's where this adjusted revenues column came from. Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
So I guess I would ask Molly again, are you comfortable, Molly, with the 200 for new growth?
As best as I can estimate. I was going to go through it again to see what came after the first of the year, but I haven't got there yet. Tomorrow, Joanne and I are going out to measure the first apartment building that's getting its occupancy permit. So that's good news. We'll have one of them at 100% complete.
Excellent.
So are they actually going to be renting then soon?
I don't know how to answer. I would assume so, but I don't know.
I can tell you they already have rentals. There's actually people staying at the hotel waiting to move in.
Yes, there are.
Thanks, Tom.
So if we delay that, then we would have more room tax, right? Should we tie up Molly tomorrow and not allow her to go out and measure it?
Ooh,
Oh, Stan.
your glass is half
What?
full.
What? Who said that?
well, I'm only drinking coffee, Stan. What are you drinking?
The good stuff.
All right, well, I don't know. I just feel like Margaret's done all this work and we should be moving in some direction.
Well, yeah.
Well,
Why don't we,
Based,
let's vote the revenues then.
14.3 looks like a reasonable, I mean, it's the best estimate we have at this time.
I was gonna say, it's had tons of thought put into it, and I don't think we could spin our wheels and second guess everything, but I think we've done enough of that. I think we should just.
yeah, and everyone just needs to recognize, please, everything is still subject to change. We're doing the best we can based on this moment in time.
All right, and I mean, and that's the scary thing about trying to say that what this is going to be the budget is, because we're all still saying, oh, it's the best we know. Well, yeah,
Yep.
it's
Yep.
unfortunately.
I should probably inform FinCom that I notified departments today that at our next monthly department heads meeting, I am going to be discussing the 112 budget scenario. I sent an email to all of you kind of outlining a meeting that I was part of with the DLS Deputy Commissioner Sean Cronin yesterday. He is strongly advising all cities and towns, if there's any risk at all in not being able to adopt a budget by June 30th, to submit a request for 112 budgets. So we are going to plan, in addition to this, we're going to go ahead and plan a 112 budget scenario in the event we're unable to adopt a full budget by June 30th. So I just want to be sure that I give you a heads up on that.
Yeah.
Margaret, when is that department head meeting?
I'm meeting with department heads next week, next Tuesday. I do it every month.
Can
Margaret,
that's an open meeting, right?
No, it's not.
No.
But no, you can sit in as an attendee. Yeah, these are meetings that I conduct with department heads, so they're not subject to the open meeting law. We don't do minutes, we don't tape them. But you're certainly welcome to attend, and we can have you listen in if you'd like.
Yeah, I'd like to do that if I don't have something going on with work.
Mm-hmm.
So do I need an invite?
Yes. So Mary, can you share the login with Janet?
Yes.
Please. Thank you.
Margaret, just so that we're all clear, the 112 budget does not mean necessarily one dividing the total budget by 12, but it means 1 month at a time?
That's correct, 1 month at a time. And departments are going to be, the departments are going to be asked to do it for the entire first quarter, month by month. So in July, what we'd be looking for are, we'd be looking for expected revenues in that particular month. There typically aren't tons of revenues in the month of July, August, and September. The big revenues come in later typically, but we'd be looking for departments to provide only their fixed costs for the month of July, August, and September. So only contracts, only utilities, only payroll. So only those things and nothing beyond that. So that's an unfortunate exercise we have to do, but I think it's in the event this full budget doesn't get passed, it's a way that we can go into next year with some semblance of a budget. So.
All right, am I correct that 1/12 is 1/12 of the last fiscal year's budget?
No, it's not. It can be, no, that's not, it's not less than 1/12 of, it's not less than 1/12 for the prior fiscal year. So it could increase, but the way we're going to be asking for information, it wouldn't.
It's not actually
The
a 1/12
is arrived at based on
It's a month, it's a month to month.
So we're going to have to ask for things like the Worcester County retirement, because it's going to be due in the first month. We're going to have to ask for some of the assessments that are actually due the first in July. Stuff like the dispatch center, school type stuff. So there are going to be some things that we're going to have to ask that are going to be over and above, per se, 1/12 budget. But again, it's it's more of a month to month. It's not actually a 1/12 budget, but.
Yeah.
So it's expenses cash flow month to month then. Yeah.
I'm sorry, Mary, I didn't hear you.
It's a month to month expenses cash flow tracking 12 months. Is that what your plan looks like? It's when do the bills come due, basically, and which month?
It's
correct. Contracted,
okay.
You know, that type of stuff. Stuff that's mandatory. It's not a play type thing.
Got it. Thank you.
So if we develop a tentative budget for the year, is there any relationship between that and the 1/12 budget? I mean, is the spending based on what we would have put in that tentative annual budget?
Technically, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it shouldn't really be much of a difference. You know, like Margaret's been really chopping up the budget, so there isn't going to be a lot there other than necessities.
Well, I would just point out that our current revenue situation shows less revenue than last year. So Margaret just said we can't do less than the prior year. So
Expenses, correct. Our revenues are not per se overall less.
I'm not sure how you see it's less. So,
I'm just looking at FY21 14.4. Oh, FY20.
We're budgeting for FY21.
Yeah, that was a
FY20 is
reduction.
13,870.
Okay.
Yeah, no, those are the reductions we've made in revenues. So.
Yeah. Okay.
So anyway, that's an exercise. We don't have to get into that tonight, but that's something that we have to do as a backup plan if for any reason we can't adopt this full budget by June.
But we should now be working on developing a budget for the entire year. Correct?
Yes. Yes.
Yep.
So we're still showing. Are we still showing surplus revenue with the?
Yes. Yeah. The surplus revenue, based on the column that I'm developing now, the TA recommended. I'll show you this.
Right. So 128.
This one right here, TA recommendation. Okay, the, based on that bottom line, sorry, wrong sheet. That bottom line would be 14,132,105. And the available revenues are 14,308,370, which leaves a revenue surplus of 176,265.
Okay.
So how far are you in specifying the expenses? Have you got all of the
Getting
expense
there.
lines?
Everything except wages, essentially. That's going to be my last, next week is what I'm expecting to be my last round.
Well, so
And, go ahead.
I'm sorry, is this a very simple exercise then of looking at what you have in that column, whatever budget, that column O
This one.
or whichever, double A,
Yep.
and say, yeah, that looks okay, that looks okay, that looks okay?
Yep. That's what those based on these numbers that I'm plugging in here and the numbers that I haven't moved over yet for wages. That's the number we're looking at now. So I think that at this point, if nothing significant happens, if there's no significant changes between now and next week when I make wage recommendations, you should be seeing a revenue surplus of 176, 178, somewhere between 170 and 200.
Right, a revenue surplus for an austerity budget.
Revenue surplus.
Right, but when you're saying well, you're saying the wage numbers, then so are we saying no COLAs? Are we saying no?
Yes,
no
we are
steps?
saying no COLAs, and I'm going to be, we're saying no COLAs. I'm saying no COLAs, but what I would like to do, we've talked about this contingency line. We're going to have to, I want to continue to talk about that if possible. I'm not recommending COLAs. But we are in the midst of an HR class and comp plan through an independent human resource consultant, and they're doing comp studies for all of our town positions. And what I'd like to do is take the monies that are being saved from COLAs, put those into that contingency line in the budget. And if the HR study comes back showing that there are positions that are significantly lagging behind other comparable positions, to maybe at least address those positions to bring them to within some sort of range with other comps. So right now, the COLAs in the column on the expense sheet, I'll show you. Hold on. Way over here. The total of this column, this AI column, the COLAs, adds up to about $28,000. I'm going to be opening my contract, and I don't know if any other employment contracts will be opened up to level fund wages at the FY20 rate. So for example, on mine, instead of 149, the number would be 147. So you'd add another $2,000 to that COLA column. So there are going to be further reductions in wages, but I would ask that those monies in that column be moved over to the contingency line to provide some sort of adjustments to any employees, if there are any, to be able to bring them up to market, to somewhere around market comps.
So we've talked about not a contingency, a supplemental budget or a potential.
Contingency. Yeah.
No, but the potential for I guess it's really another meeting. Would it be possible, should we in fact be fortunate enough to end up with this $175,000 left over, would we go back and consider giving the COLAs that we had not given?
That's going to, Mike, as much as I'd like to say yes now, I can't. that is going to very much depend on our financial situation once we get more information.
Right, that's why I say, but so later on during the year, where we define that we
It
are,
can be,
could we go back and do that in a supplemental budget?
That's a
I
possibility.
worry about the town employees.
I appreciate that, and I do too. I do too. We're lucky to have jobs, though. Those of us who are,
Yeah.
we're lucky to have jobs. We know that there are many, many people out there that don't at the moment. So, but to your question, that could be reassessed later in the year.
Thank you.
Margaret, remind me on the setting up the contingency line, and as I look at the revenue surplus that is indicated here on the income sheet, where does the contingency go? Does it get added on as another expense? Remind me, because you told me.
Well, the contingency, and June and I had talked about this, and we've been going back and forth. So if that money, if that 176, 265, if all those numbers up top come out right, that money is going to go to excess levy capacity. It's going to be excess levy capacity, money on, yeah, extra money. But we were thinking, and I'd like, this is food for thought for FinCom, that we're not using any free cash to the budget. The town typically doesn't do that. It's not a great practice, but if we did some funding from free cash specifically for that contingency line, all monies that remained unspent from that line at the end of the year would again revert to free cash. So it might actually be a reasonable use of free cash to create that contingency line and fund it from free cash.
Oh, and then it cycles back in if it's not used.
It cycles back to free cash if it's unused.
That's an interesting thought.
And what do we have available for free cash, June?
I don't have the number right here.
It's
1 point something, isn't it?
It's
$1 million.
$1,210,792.
You say 1,200,000?
$1,210,732.
And based on the articles, how much of that are we going to spend?
There is
Does
a
anyone-
proposed $205,000, much of which, or a portion of which, is going to be reimbursed through a grant.
That's the paving.
That's the 23 Linden parking lot reconstruction.
I'm sorry, the horses ran by too fast. I couldn't hear what you said.
The paving and what else, Margaret?
That's it. The only other possibility would be the snow and ice deficit, which I'm thinking at this point would be able, our fingers are crossed. Oh, June, please.
Big snow on Saturday.
No.
Yes,
All right,
they're talking snow, so.
We actually think it might be possible to do an end of year appropriation transfer from the snow and ice wage line to cover that deficit. So that might not need free cash, that article. So Stan, to your question, it's $205,000 that's proposed to be used from free cash, and that is only for the parking lot reconstruction.
All right, well, being the big picture person that I am, as opposed to the detail-oriented guy that others, detail-oriented that others are, I guess what I would like to throw out there is just as a broad statement or a broad overriding thing for this to say that if we can fund a contingency with free cash, and it sounds like we have a significant amount of free cash that it's not taking away from being able to do other things that we're proposing to do. And if we could have that contingency, and I don't know the logistics of this again, I'm more doing a big picture thing, but if we could roll the COLA scenario into that as a contingency, I would seriously like to look at reducing the 12,374 of tax levy and try to give the taxpayers a break as well on this. If we're looking at a revenue surplus,
Stan, I understand what you're saying, but please keep in mind, if we give, which isn't a bad thing, but if we give the taxpayers a break this year, then next year we may wind up having that up and down thing happen again, as far as if taxpayers say get an extra $100 back on their taxes this year. Next year, if we level fund everything and everything goes through again, you're going to wind up going up the 2.5% plus the amount that you returned.
Yeah, I'm not suggesting we give anything back. I'm suggesting that maybe taxes don't go up 2.5% next year.
Gotcha. Okay, but just keep that in mind as far as
No,
that.
I get that, and what I still don't understand is how the actual tax bill is generated from this 12,374. But what I would like to see is I would like to not see people's tax bills go up even by the 2.5% that we're allowed to. I'd like to give, if we're talking about reduced revenue across the board, we also have to understand that families have reduced revenue. And I don't want to just take this surplus and put it back into expenses. I would just as soon take it off of how much we're raising taxes. I'm not saying we have to give back money, but how about we don't take as much? We don't have to take 2.5 every year. That's the max. We don't have to take it.
I just want to remind you that it's a reval year and houses are still selling. And so their assessments are going to change. So anybody put an addition on their house, their taxes are going to go up, or if their house is worth more, they're going to.
Sure, and there, unfortunately, there's nothing we can do about that. But what I don't want a budgetary process to force an increase people's tax bills.
And also keep in mind, last year we didn't.
And that's what I would like to at all costs.
Also, just remember, last year we didn't stay within this top section that Margaret is showing us. We actually went into part of the debt exclusion that was available to you. So just keep that in mind. So just even doing what Margaret is planning here, taxes may be more level than you anticipate just because of that fact too.
Molly, would it be possible while you're on this call, would it be possible to go and pull up the DLS calculator? I don't know if have you shared a screen before? I think this might be this might be helpful for FinCon to see. If not, it's okay. I can share the link with.
Let me see if I can do that.
If we look here, so this is last year's total, 13,873.43. That was the total income last year.
Mm-hmm.
There's 14,308.370 based on revised revenue projections, which means an overall budget increase of $438,027. So DLS has a calculator that's specific to each town, and I don't know that they would represent it as 100% accurate, but it would give some sort of idea to users about what impact it would have on their tax bills. It's also based on the current year, not next year. So it at least gives some sort of idea of what $438,027 means on tax bills for residential and for commercial. So if we can get that, that would be really helpful.
I'm working on it.
Okay. So Stan, you want to stay on revenues?
You'll have to unshare your screen for Molly to share hers, Mary, just so you know.
Yeah, I'll do it. Molly, tell me if you're able to get it up there. So Stan, you want to stay on revenues?
I'm still looking for it, so.
Okay.
What, Margaret?
You want to stay on revenues, right?
I'd like to have a clear picture. What I want to avoid at all costs, putting forth a budget that will automatically do things that I don't want them to do.
But Stan, I still get confused every time we look at this. But I look at the fiscal 20 actual of local property taxes of 11,970, new growth of 214. So that is 12,184. If my quick math was correct. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, and I take that 12,184 and then compare that to the column K, local property taxes of 12,374. That is 184 to 374 is $190,000. Correct?
Okay. Sure.
So it would seem to me that the total taxes on existing property that under this scenario are going up $190,000.
Except that we can never get anyone to say that that's what's going to happen, because it all depends on this and it depends
Well,
on that.
it depends on whether these
that.
other things are correct or not. But 190 over 12, what did I say? 184. I have to do the arithmetic.
Okay, I found it.
Okay. Is it up? So it's up? Folks, would you mind if I just stop sharing this screen for a moment so Molly can put up that
That's
calculator?
okay.
Okay. All right, Molly, go ahead and hit screen share, and then you can put up the calculator.
All right, where do I? Basic?
So it's a green button at the bottom that says screen share.
Anyway,
Yeah.
Stan, if
Okay,
I'm
there you
correct
go.
on that,
And now
then
click
it's
on
a
the screen that you want to
1.6% increase.
click on the screen that you want to share.
Well, you have to click the one you want, and then down, I think in the bottom right, it says share screen. And you've got to click that also.
Molly, do you see your calculator on your screen right now?
Well, I'm having, wait.
We see blank.
I lost Zoom. Okay.
Well, we still hear you, so you're still on Zoom.
Okay, so it comes up, but then you go away.
Okay. Well, that's,
Wait, I have a whiteboard. I don't know how that got there. All right, so I see all you guys.
Okay, so Molly, hit at the middle of the bottom of the screen, hit the little green arrow that says share screen.
Yep, and then I get a little box that asks me things. So I want to share screen again.
Well, so then you should see, when you do that, you should also see everything that's on your desktop, and you click one of those, like that car.
She is. She's got it.
I do?
We're seeing a car with zeros on it.
Okay. Oh, all right.
and so,
There you go. Now I see.
all
you.
right, there it is. Okay, so Molly, if we do, see that where it says increase selected?
Yep.
Oh, yeah, enter dollar amount, $438,027.
438.
027.
Instead of the million that's on there now, you're saying, instead of that yellow box.
Yeah. Okay, so here's 438,027. So you see the values there and what the tax impact would be. You see residential and open space, R&O, assessed value, residential and open space, and then commercial, industrial, personal property. So you
And
see
then-
what the tax rate impacts would be on those value, homes.
I can't remember, do we assess at full value or is it at some percentage?
No,
Molly, what do
we assess it full market value, which by the time we get around to it is always less, but
But this would be,
the aim is for full and fair market value. So it also gives you what the tax rate would go up right there.
So why is what's CIP tax bill?
Commercial,
commercial.
industrial, personal
Oh, okay.
property.
Okay. So average single family residence. So if the average home is 430, this is saying their tax bill will go up $240.
So I don't understand this because this says my taxes will go up 4.2%.
If your assessment's at 550, then
Yeah.
your taxes would go up 308. I don't see a 430 unless I'm,
Well,
I
it's
just
somewhere
did- I
in
just-
between.
I'm sorry, I didn't see that up there. Sorry. I see what you're saying.
Yeah. But Mike, what were you saying?
Well, I have to go look at, to see exactly what my taxes were, but
So,
and what my
so,
assessment is.
so,
Hang on a
yeah,
second.
keep in mind, I was gonna tell Michael, keep in mind, this is based on a $438,000 scenario. This has nothing to do with what happened this year. This
Based
is,
on last year's total levy too.
yes, and at the current year's tax rate.
Oh, right. I mean, so, but it's the current, what generates the tax rate is is how much we need to levy, right? But what's going to generate 2021's tax rate?
But what you get for state aid and those things all affect that too.
Your total levy, $12,314,017.
Okay,
so-
so I just look at this, this is a 3.8% increase on my bill. So I don't understand it at all.
What's your assessment?
635. So I'm using the 364, and my bill last year was 95.50.
What did you say your assessment was? 632?
635. Oh my goodness, now it's 6.6%.
Um,
3.8%.
So the new tax rate in this scenario would be 1635 times your assessment would be 382.25.
Does that include all of the ups and extras, the
No,
community, yeah. Because I'm looking at the total.
hold on, I can do that.
I'm sorry, I may be looking at the wrong taxes. Which taxes should I be looking at, 19 or 20?
20.
All right, I'm looking at 19.
which was
Well,
another
they're,
high
well,
year.
they're talking about that. My question is, and I'm just going back to what Stan said, what is the percentage? I mean, I look at all of this, but what is that percentage? Is it 2.5? Is it 3.5? Is it 4.5?
I think it's 1.6.
1.6, okay.
So that your CPA would be 262.26.
Okay, Molly, I had the wrong year. So let me, at least I think I had the wrong year.
But even looking at this year, we're not looking at the same increases. We still wouldn't be talking apples to apples. Okay,
Lost my tax
I
bill.
thought this might be a helpful.
Yeah, I think I understand, Margaret. How did you come up with that 400,000 number that went into that Molly typed?
Yeah, the 400,000 number is the increase between the total income for FY20. That was 13,873,43.
Oh, yeah, yeah,
That's the difference between this adjusted revenues this year and that number
okay.
is 438,027.
4308, yeah. Oh, right, okay, I see.
Well, I think this works out to much more than your 1.6%, Mike.
That's what I don't understand, because when I look at the taxes themselves from the spreadsheet we've been working on, the difference between local property taxes in column K on Margaret's spreadsheet and the local property taxes plus the actual new growth the prior year, the difference between those is 1.6%. So Molly, my assessment was 648.1 last year. All right, so 650 is very close. And then if I look at 364 is the increase. $10,493 were my taxes.
Right, but
Still get a
it's
3.5% increase.
Right. So how are we?
I don't
That's what I don't get. We're supposed to be not supposed to be able to tax it higher than 2.5, and yet that
Yeah,
one.
and mine comes
one
out of
calculation without changing his assessed value is raising his taxes by more than 2.5%.
The
This is what
2.5%
frustrates me.
increases is on the full tax levy, the total levy. So this year, how much did you say we used? Hold on for a minute.
Margaret, can you go back to your spreadsheet?
So your taxes would go up $358.19.
Okay,
And what's that? And what's that percent?
358.
What's that? How much is that an increase over this year?
Hang on, we go back and find what my taxes were. They were 10 something, but I've now lost the sheet.
All right. So it's 3 something. It's over 3%.
Oh yeah, it's about 3.3 and 493, 3.4118.
My sheet
4%.
shows 3.4 as well. Molly, can you end share screen and I'll go ahead and share the spreadsheet again? Thanks.
So I just went up 3.4. Did you, Molly? You said 3.412.
I didn't, Margaret said that, I didn't.
Yeah, I came up with
3.4.
3.4117. So that's
3.4.
right.
As a frame of reference, this year, I think it was what, 16%? 13? It was in the teens. But yes, this shows 3.4%.
Oh, look at that. It's right there.
So that is between.
Yeah.
So that's. Yeah. So maybe I shouldn't be calculating, including the property, the new growth in there, because I assume that column K, line 2, is taxes on the same properties that are included in column G, lines 2 and 3.
Yeah, you would think.
Is that wrong? And doesn't new growth from last year get folded into existing property for this year?
New growth.
New growth
Is
From
an
last year.
addition,
From 2020.
is an addition to,
Values.
But look, so what I'm saying is local property taxes this year. So Margaret, cell K2.
K2.
All right.
Oops.
That is the tax
Oops.
on what's on the same property that's included in G2
I can't take care of him, John. You need to be in charge.
plus G3, because fiscal 20's new growth is part of fiscal 21's current property.
Mike, you gotta remember revaluation.
But this wasn't, revaluation wasn't included in here at all yet. We haven't done that at all yet.
I don't know. I mean, I think I don't think you could just add them together, but I'm not the expert here.
And if we look at
New
your,
growth is based on the new values that are being added to the overall tax levy, and that would be the dollar amount that we would receive.
I understand, but what was new growth last year
Now
now
is the
part of
base.
your
is now
tax
part of,
base.
is now part of the tax base. So the taxes represented by cell K2 should be for what is represented by cell G2 plus what is represented by cell G3. That is last year's existing base plus last year's new growth.
Except that the FY20 local property taxes used that 11,970,351. It was not formula based. It was not based on any kind of tax levy formula whatsoever. It was backed into. So we need to, and you know, it did take into account these maximum budget calculations down here, but there were things in the calculation that we can't use that as a measure. This is why with this number here, we went with the DOR's recommended increase. And we showed that levy line and said, if you stay along this levy line, if you use the DOR's formula, you're going to find yourself staying on the levy line, and you're not going to experience those spikes, those peaks and dips that I think the town has more so seen peaks or spikes recently, but you're not going to see those fluctuations. Your goal is to try to stay along that levy line. So if this is reduced, and I understand what Stan is saying, and I understand the intent. If this number is reduced, and again, this number is that tax levy formula-based number. If this number is reduced to get down to say you want this percent to show as 2.5%, this is actually reducing the local property taxes that are to be used. It's deviating from the formula, so it's reducing it. And so when June explained that in future years there could be a spike, it's entirely possible that there could be a spike. There would be excess levy to be had, and in order to be able to fund large budget increases, you'd need to make those adjustments. So that's really the best way I can explain it. See, I believe that the use of local property taxes should be based on the state's formula and should try to track along that the tax levy formula line in order to alleviate those peaks and dips.
Okay, but let's forget about how we arrived at that number, at 12,374.
Okay.
Right? Assuming that is the levy for the existing property base for fiscal 21, then and I'm thinking now, what is the property that this is based on, and that should be the same. And going to column G, those numbers, it says those are actual. So if those are the actual taxes, okay, then the actual taxes collected are the sum of G2 and G3, correct?
Right here.
G2,
For FY20.
G3,
For
yeah,
FY20.
those were the actual taxes collected.
Well, we
Yes?
haven't finished 20 yet.
Well, those are the actual taxes we expect to be collected.
Expected to collect. Okay.
They were the actual taxes billed.
Bill.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So then, if we go to the base, the base for fiscal 21 is those same properties that are reflected in those two lines in fiscal 20. So if I look at the sum of those two lines in fiscal 20 So the taxes on property taxed in fiscal 20 was 12,184. And we're saying the taxes we are now saying would be taxed on those same properties in fiscal 21 is 12,374. That's $190,000. That $190,000 is a 1.6% increase from what was taxed on those properties in fiscal 20. And so what I don't understand is when we then take this number and go back to that calculator that Molly was just using, why do I get a 3.4% increase?
No, that's also
instead of a 1.6% increase?
That's J2. Look at J2.
I see
It's a
the
magical
J2.
3.4.
Yeah.
Well, Margaret, you said we backed into G2. G2 wasn't a calculated number. It's not an actual number. It's a backed into number.
Right.
No, G2 is an actual number, isn't it?
No, it's
Well,
not.
It's an actual number, but it wasn't based on a DOR calculation like you saw in Molly's calculator, and like we're trying to.
But again, is that what the actual taxes were?
No.
No, the taxes were the 12,314,01724.
Where's that? Yeah, well, that 12,314. That's what I said. It's 12,314, 12,114.
So I just
no.
looked.
I don't know where. I'm totally confused at this point.
I just looked up the FY20 levy limit on that should have been used, I guess, and it's 12,072,601.
Well, guess what? That is right here. So that's the maximum budget calculations. Those are the maximum. Those are the levy limits. Yeah.
And then you would add the debt exclusion to that. So our maximum levy limit would have been 13,064,003.
Not including the 2.5% plus new growth, right?
No, you want me to share my screen?
Yeah.
This is a popsicle headache is what this is.
Oh. I don't know if I can. So there's the levy limit, and then the maximum. So the 12,072,601 includes the 2.5%.
Yes. So that's for FY20. And so in that column on my spreadsheet that I showed you, if you all have.
I'll stop sharing.
Okay, let me go back. Let me show you exactly where I've got that 13,064. That is in FY20. That is right here. Right there. So that's FY20. Now we're talking FY21. So that was maximum levy calculation. We didn't fully use the amount that we could have used because we didn't tap into, well, I shouldn't say we didn't fully tap into the debt exclusion or excess levy capacity. So Molly, that number matches up.
Yep.
This is from the recap.
But it's using the 12,072 instead of the 11,569,32, if that's what that says. It's kind of small.
No,
Yeah.
The amount that Margaret's using up on the top is the amount that we actually tax people.
Oh, okay.
Which has been below. So again, that's not formula based. This is based on the
Actual. That's the actual amount that was used out of the levy last year.
Which is the 11.9?
No, the 12. The one that Margaret
370.
has up there as the local property taxes. That's what we actually tax people.
In FY20, the 11,970.
No. No, the amount that Margaret has there that says the 12,374,416, that's the amount that we
That's the-
actually taxed on the recap sheet.
That's FY21 June.
Okay. Yeah, let me just show you the screen.
Oh, wait a minute. You
I
gonna
don't-
share?
Yeah, I don't know how to do this, but I'll give it a shot.
If I can do it, you can.
Hi, Chief Clark. Nobody acknowledged that you joined us.
Good evening, how are you? Thank you.
We're good.
Janet's way more social than I am. Sorry, Chief.
That's okay, Stan.
He's staying in the background. He's just not talking. So this is the amount right here that we actually taxed people.
Well, no,
That's, should that column be in the FY20 top column?
No, say this. This is the recap sheet, the actual recap sheet. So this here shows you what the revenues are. How much your state aid is, how much local receipts, offset receipts, how much we use from free cash. This is the total amount that was needed to cover all the expenses.
And is that where, so that's how you basically are backing into the 12,314 because you're taking the 15 that you need for expenses and you have all your other revenues
Correct,
and the rest comes out of the taxpayers.
correct.
Which the recap is actually a higher number than I show on the spreadsheet because I was having significant difficulty trying to determine the various adjustments that happened in that number. So if we look at, or if you look at the FY20 actuals of local property tax plus the 214,044 in new growth, that only totals 12,184,395. So an additional over $100,000, about $120,000 was put on the taxpayers this year, FY20. The goal here is to try to stick with the amount of taxes to be levied.
Well, I'll tell you, my goal is to not have the tax bills go up 16%, or whatever it is. I don't know where the line is. Whatever DOR recommends, I don't want my tax bill up 16% again.
Margaret,
We're trying not to back into that number anymore.
Well,
Margaret,
right.
you would-
So that's what scares me is that because we back into that number and what's going to generate that number is a bunch of reduced revenues. All of those other numbers are going to add up to a smaller number, which is going to make the number that we tax a higher number. I want to make sure I want to make sure that our calculations on your spreadsheet, Margaret, and I'm not doubting you. I just want to make sure, double sure that we're not using a back into number that's going to turn tax bills into a nightmare again.
Well, I can tell you the tax number is not a back into number. And if you leave,
But that's what happened on the recap sheet. That's what we just determined on the recap sheet. It's the expenses minus local revenues is what we have to tax the taxpayers. So whatever we put forth as a budget and on expenses minus all of the reduced local revenues, local receipts is going to generate the number that we're going to tax people at. And
so can we think about that 12,314 for a moment and go back to Margaret's spreadsheet?
How do I get out of this?
Oh, just hit the green
Stop
button.
share.
Hit the stop share at the top of the screen.
Oh, I see it.
All right, so Margaret,
Yeah.
should 11,9 whatever 970 actually be 12,314, or should the sum
Those
of
two
those
numbers, those two numbers combined,
should be 12,314?
correct.
So if you get a 12,314, from 12,314 to 12,374 is $60,000. And $60,000 is
12,374.
is 0.5%.
Oh, where's your little calculation, Margaret, for what generates that 12,374?
Right here.
So it's local
See,
property tax.
FY20, yep, FY20 levy limit. I can't get it on the bottom of my screen here. You know what? Let me drag the comment down so you can see. Let me show the note, and then I will drag this. Oh, God. Drag this down so we can scroll down here and look at the actual maximum levy calculations. Here we go. FY20 levy limit right here.
Yeah.
Plus 2.5% increase. So it's 11,569,324 plus 289,233.
Yeah.
Plus new growth 214,044.
Yeah.
Times 1.5%.
What's the 1.5%? What one?
Oh, I'm sorry. No, 2.5.
1.025.
Yeah, increase it by 2.5%.
So doesn't that increase it by 2.5 twice?
No, it only.
No,
it only,
the other, yeah.
No, it's the formula is right here. It's only once, right here. Oh, I see what you're saying, Stan. No, because that's the current years. You would increase it by the 2.5% for the following year.
I can't move your mouse. Oh, that's funny.
The levy limit plus 2.5%,
Mm-hmm.
which is the amount that you're allowed to raise the taxes in 2020.
Mm-hmm. Plus the 2.5%
Plus
increase
growth.
for
Plus new growth.
20. Plus new growth times 1.025 gives you the FY21 number.
The levy limit.
The new levy limit calculation, yeah.
And that's the
Why is that
12
not doing it times 2.5? That is times in it. You're doing 2.5
No,
twice.
Stan, because of the 2.5% that she's adding there on line G36 is, so first of all, G35 is the levy limit from FY19.
Yeah.
And so you add then the 2.5% increase from the prior year, or you add the 2.5%, yeah, the 2.5% increase from the prior year.
Margaret, if you go over and if you just put a little formula over there and add last year, the fiscal year 20 levy limit, new growth, and the 2.5%, it's going to come out to this 12,072,601.
Yeah, okay, so let me just, I'll do a sum right here.
Yep.
And I'll do this and I'll show, okay, so this
All
right
you
here.
need to do is highlight cell
There it is.
35.
Okay, Stan, so that's what last year's levy limit was. When we did the budget last year, we used that plus a little bit of the debt exclusion. So that's where it came out with the amount that we actually spent on the taxes for last year. Does that make sense?
No. How much was that?
We used
12,314,017.
24.
24.
Yep. So that's
Okay.
what we actually taxed people on. So we taxed them on last year's levy limit plus the 2.5% plus new growth.
Okay.
Plus that difference that came out of the debt.
So about 300,000, 200 something thousand dollars more.
So June,
Yep.
that 12,314, Margaret, can you scroll up again, please?
Mm-hmm.
why is 12,314 not the number in G2?
Because
Because in G2 is because that's the year before. So go, Margaret, go back down to the bottom.
mhm.
No, it says that's that's the actual taxes in
Yeah,
FY20.
yeah, no. If we go to the top here, the reason that is not 12,314 is because there was no, we didn't use the DOR formula. DOR formula wasn't used.
It says actual. Do we have
The
actual?
actual
Or do we not
amount used, Michael. And this number, these two right here,
Yeah.
they're off because I could not reconcile what was shown on June's recap sheet. I could not reconcile what actually happened. There were a lot of moving pieces here when I was trying to piece this together. But when it says actual, that doesn't mean the tax, that doesn't mean the actual tax levy. That means the actual, well, what seemed to be the actual amount of taxes that we were requiring people to pay to support the operating budget. There was no formula behind it. It wasn't derived from, it wasn't derived from the levy limit calculations. It was just a number.
Yeah, but somehow we ought to be able to say, this is what taxes were for fiscal 20. This is what we're proposing for fiscal 21. We should be able to calculate the difference between those, figure out what percentage that is. And it seems that if you then adjust the rate so that
we could
accordingly, that you should get the same percentage.
We could. Let me see if, yeah, go ahead. Talk amongst yourselves. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take this number. I'm going to leave the 214,044 because we know that is the recap number for new growth. This is the number that's in question. So I'm going to adjust this so that these two numbers right here total the 12,314, 01724. Okay. All right. No, I could do it just like this.
What did you say? 12,313, 074?
12,314, 017.24 minus this
214,044
equals. That's what it is. And now it's 2.3%. So your FY20 actual, so these two numbers here total the 12,314, 01724. The increase now shows as 2.3%.
Okay, but then why would Molly put in the new number into the calculator? Taxes went up 4.3%.
3.4.
3.4 was it? Okay.
Except that this throws this number off. Except that this throws this number off.
It just seems to me that if I know that the taxes were the taxes collected in year A were $10, and the taxes collected in year that we're proposing for year B are $12, that I can calculate that the difference is 20%. And that when I adjust the rate for year B and multiply that by somebody's assessment, the taxes should go up 20%. And that doesn't seem to be what's happening.
Never does.
I wish I could explain what happened. I can. I cannot explain. I cannot explain what happened in FY20 or FY19.
Okay, so let me then ask you, Margaret, can you tell me that if we were to right now to vote in this revenue projection of on K2 of 12,374,416, or to keep that on this sheet as a number for local property taxes, what is the average taxpayer going to increase on their taxes separate from assessed values going up? What would their increase be And I think that's not an answer. I don't think you can, well, I
I
shouldn't say
can't
that.
answer that right
What-
now. No.
What's that percentage? Yeah,
It's hard to understand why that shouldn't be
and
2.3%.
and it's also hard to
No, it's
budget
actually, it's not gonna be
expenses
2.3%.
to allow for that
Sorry.
number.
Again, because it includes, because what's included in K2 is the same as what's included in G2 and G3. So it's the difference, it's only $60,000. It's from 12,314 to 12,374. And $60,000 is 0.48%, I think, if I remember from my calculation before. Yeah, 0.49%. Which, if that happened, you'd be happy, Stan.
I'd be thrilled, but I right now I have no comfort level that there really is this budget.
I understand. I agree with you.
I guess the biggest thing is that you have to know how the recap sheet works to understand the process of all of these items going into it.
And keep in mind that when you have the tax classification action by the selectmen, later on, that also affects the weight on individual tax bills, because different classifications may get more or less of a bite of the thing.
And then it throws everything else off.
It doesn't throw off the totals, but it throws
No,
off
correct.
the effect on individual bills.
Correct. Because the percentage change.
That's right.
I heard today that the Department of Revenue did a YouTube presentation on this. I haven't had a chance to find it or look it up, but they said it explained the tax rate setting pretty well. So I will find that tomorrow and send the link out to everyone.
And maybe,
Thank you.
maybe
Or
Molly,
I'll send it to you first, Margaret. And you
well,
can,
maybe if you could also send out the levy limit primer. So there should be a YouTube video on the levy limit primer. And that way we can kind of get back to basics.
okay.
Yeah, I'm not concerned about the levy limit. I can see how you calculate that. It's just, I don't understand why the change doesn't seem to be the same if we look at it in aggregate or we look at it based on the change in rate or the change for individual properties.
Yeah, I don't know. It never works out the way you think it is, and I can't explain why that happens.
Well, unfortunately, it's not cut and dry. It's not just black and white here. Everything that happens has an effect on the tax rate. So if the conservation purchases land, that changes the values for the town. If the selectmen change the percentage as far as what's commercial and what's residential, that changes everything.
Right.
Everything has an effect on the tax rate. It's not just cut and dry. I mean, if the new growth changes a couple of $1,000s, it could change things. If the amount of the overlay needs to be adjusted because we don't ask for enough, everything affects the
Right.
outcome of it.
I understand that, June, but what we're working with here is we're assuming none of that changed. And when we did a calculation based on this spreadsheet, it comes out very different from when Molly puts it into her calculator.
No, we put it into the documents, but yes, I mean, that's what I'm trying to get you to understand. Unless you know how to do the recap sheet, this is very difficult to explain in an hour of sitting here.
Yeah, but if we've made no changes, if we've assumed nothing else changed, which seems to be what we were assuming now, then these things should be transitive. You know, if it works in aggregate, it should work equally at the atomistic level, you know, the individual taxpayer level.
One of the things that's not in any of this is the overlay. And the assessors have to determine a figure for that when they're doing the recap sheet. And this year, with the conditions in the country, in the town, they're probably going to have to assign a pretty good amount to overlay.
But the
Well,
conditions and what's happening in the world right now will not be reflected in this assessment. Will all be reflected in the FY22 assessments.
Yeah.
Not that we still won't get arguments and whatnot, but
you will have to figure overlay for possible unpaid taxes or whatever, based on the fact that things are the way they are.
yes.
Well, it wouldn't be necessarily the unpaid. It would be if they question the values and we have to adjust the values down, then that would offset the overlay. Unfortunately, if we have any revenue deficits, then that would be where it came in if people just stopped paying their taxes.
Margaret, if you've got any focus left after this conversation, I think I'm starting to understand, but don't ask me to do a recap sheet. So if we go back to that 11 million number that was in the G2 cell, that the original number in there, was that the actual revenue that went towards our operating budget expenses?
That was paid from taxes in the omnibus budget?
Yes.
Is that what you're, yes.
Yeah. So if we had a warrant income item that wasn't in the sort of expenses that we're looking at here, would that represent a chunk of property taxes that were raised that doesn't show up in cell D2?
Can anyone understand her? Because I can't understand a word she's
I got a
saying.
hard time.
Oh, what? Is my audio bad?
It sounds like you're speaking from very far away.
Oh, geez. Let me get a speaker and try that again.
The clear thing you said was, is my audio bad?
Hey, Stan, are you ready for a moment of levity?
Sure.
Did everybody see the president, that is Mr. Trump, walk through the, I think it was a mask making factory in Arizona, wearing no mask? But more importantly, did you hear what music was playing in the background?
No. Well.
Live and Let Die.
Are you serious? Was
Yes.
it really? Oh my. Oh my. So Janet, I'm sorry, Mary, were you asking whether additional taxes were levied in order to fund the budget from this? I don't know what you were asking. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm. Is the audio better now?
I think it sounds better to me.
Okay, I plugged in an external speaker, so I'm hoping it'll stay. My question was that G2, the 11 million, is that the amount of local property taxes that were used for to pay for expenses in the operating budget that year?
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
yeah.
So it. Okay. Because we actually had more revenue coming in. Yes or
no? Based on the recap sheet, there was actually, this number was the one that I had calculated right here. Is that what you're asking? So based on the recap number, these two total that 12,314,017.24.
Yeah, I think I'm just was gonna leave my question. I don't think it's the right time of night to be asking this. So,
Somebody talking?
No.
Did I lose audio or are we just all in
No,
silence?
just
I
nobody
think we're all
was
in
talking.
Right.
Okay.
So is there more we're gonna do tonight?
Well, have
Yeah.
we done anything?
I don't think we've done anything and I feel badly
Well,
for
I-
Margaret. She works and works and works and works and then we all just sit here and hash over and we don't seem to be getting anywhere. I understand it's not easy and people, but it's, I feel bad.
So I thought we did one thing, which I thought we were ready to accept column K as the revenue estimate. And then I guess, Stan, you had the question of whether you wanted to reduce K2.
Yeah, I mean, I was ready to accept it until I started thinking about the fact that, do we just use the standard formula of just automatically using that 2.5%? And part of me says no. Well, let's do it at 1.5. And yeah, I understand that deviates from the line, but COVID-19 deviates from everything else. So I'm not sure that I agree that we should do business as usual, which is using DOR recommendations on everything, because this is not business as usual. We're not in a business as usual time. And it's the same thing about using rainy day funds. It's raining. Hi, it's raining. So.
Well, my concern about using rainy day funds for FY21 is the fact that I think we're going to need them more in FY22.
Yeah, which is fine. I'm not suggesting that we spend that we put something from stabilization in here or something, like we're trying, like create a whole new revenues, going to fund the budget from something else. But I also not sure that I think we should be funding the budget on taxpayers who a vast majority of them are going to have a hard time paying their tax bills. And I'm not comfortable using the standard 2.5%. We're allowed to go 2.5. Let's just go 2.5. We can go 2.5. Let's go 2.5. We don't have to go 2.5.
So
Then what you're gonna have to do then is go through each line item and start just chopping it up.
Wait,
I'm not sure I agree with that. We say we have a surplus right now.
if
We have a
you
surplus
went,
of
But
$148,000.
you have a surplus of the 125. If you decreased it by the 125, it's still not gonna bring it down to what you're speaking of.
1.5% instead of 2.5% would take that number to 253,690.
Oh, you want me to put that in?
Well, June, I don't understand. If we don't change any other number, what are we going to do with that revenue? If we don't do anything else, what are we going to do with that revenue surplus?
253,690.
Oh, 253. Oh, I'm sorry, 12.
253,690.
So we're still showing a surplus of 55,000 by reducing that by that amount.
So
how do we incorporate that revenue surplus? If we wanted to pass a budget tonight, what would we do about that revenue surplus line?
That can be the contingency we talked
We'd either
about.
have to reduce revenues or we'd have to add to expenses.
Contingency.
No, you leave it and let it be excess levy capacity.
No contingency?
Just leave it.
Well, contingency is a plus and a minus. That's a revenue.
The contingency should be
expense.
funded from free cash.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Now, just keep in mind, now you're going to be giving people back money. Because that amount is less than what we taxed them last year.
I would love to see it turn into,
Yes.
Why? I thought we taxed them at 11.9.
No, we taxed them last year at the 12,314,017.24. That's what they actually paid in taxes last year.
somehow, given everything else that's happened tonight, I feel that if we plug that number into the calculator, the tax rate would still be higher.
Well, it very well could. All it's going to take is one thing change, or if the selectmen change the ratio, things will change.
What number did you say, June?
Last year, we taxed the taxpayers on the recap sheet, the 12,314,017.24.
Where does that go on this? Where does that go on Margaret's graph here?
Nowhere.
Right here.
It per se doesn't really go in with the numbers that she's using here.
No, I'm not, because those are the numbers that this one in particular, I could not reconcile.
But if we put in what June says we actually did, what does it do to this?
Mm-hmm.
That's my question.
June, I'm putting in the new growth. What the heck?
Oh, I had that written down somewhere. I'm
That's
sorry.
okay. I've got it. I've got it written down. Equals 12,314,017.24 minus this. There it is.
See, unfortunately, that dollar amount was the amount of the levy plus part of the debt exclusion. So I guess it's just hard if you don't understand the recap sheet to get people to understand this.
Well, that's why I'm counting on you guys, to be honest with you. And I know Margaret's been working very hard because I've talked to her a few times this last week.
All right.
I'm not advocating a tax rebate. I'm advocating a lesser increase.
Margaret, I guess this is what, if I'm looking at the levy limit for the year before, you have the dollar amount that we used, which is the 12,314.
Mm-hmm.
The levy ceiling was 12,072,601, and new growth for that year was the 214,044 is what new growth was.
Mm-hmm.
So if we take, like totally doing it.
Let's do this for the next meeting.
Okay.
This is kind of.
Because unfortunately, like I said, if you don't understand the recap sheet, there's no way to make these numbers make sense to you unless you're actually looking at the recap sheet.
Well, what I got out of looking at the recap sheet in that brief time that you shared your screen was that the number that the taxpayers are asked to pay is a backed into number.
It was. That's how you guys were backing into it before.
So that's not the standard procedure?
No, not normally. Normally, they do it with what's needed, not necessarily where you want it to be. It's just way back when it was told to the taxpayers that when the malls came in, that we wouldn't like max out the levy limit. But
I guess, okay, but I guess what I'm saying is that when you're when you generated that number for what people were taxed, the $12 million, whatever that number was that you had on your recap sheet, was basically the expenses, the budgeted expenses, less all of the other revenues.
Correct.
Yes,
Yes,
backwards,
yes.
backwards. That's
Right.
why revenue, that's why we have to focus on revenue-based budgets.
Normally, if you don't have a lot of excess, you would be saying, this is what the levy limit is, plus the 2.5%, plus new growth, and that's the maximum amount of money that you can spend on your budgets. Where with us, we had a lot of excess, so we were always trying to keep it down under where it was. But the last few years, we've been actually hitting into that debt exclusion area, because once the debt exclusion is done, it's gone. And that should only be paying for the actual expenses of the repayment. That didn't help, did it?
No.
But yes, what you're saying is very true. It was backed into versus us actually looking at what our revenues are, what we can take in, and trying to keep it so that we're not going crazy on spending stuff.
Yeah, this is all about trying to rein it in so that we can avoid hitting that debt exclusion amount. When you hit the debt exclusion amount, you're taxing taxpayers more than the 2.5, more than you intend to.
Correct.
And
because when we vote something at town meeting and at the polls as a debt exclusion, that should mean to people that means that your taxes are going to go up above and beyond the regular taxes plus the 2.5% plus new growth.
By the amount of that override.
Correct.
right, but so even though the goal has been to stay away from tapping that override amount and kind of reining in or staying within the confines of the 2.5%, it's inadvertently gone over into that debt exclusion amount. So you have been going over.
Correct.
So the debt exclusion is like an override, except for the only difference is that an override stays on your,
Yes.
raises your levy limit.
There's different types, correct. If you do the override, it's a permanent override. If we do a debt exclusion, then that means that your taxes are going to go up until the debt is paid off. You could
Correct.
also do something called a debt exclusion, which means that your taxes only go up for that 1 year.
That's a capital exclusion.
Yes.
Yep.
So there's a couple of different ways to do it, but the way that we've been doing things, it's kind of like when we purchased the ladder truck, we purchased that within the levy limit. So that means that we had to tap into some of that debt exclusion that we were trying to stay away from because there wasn't room in the levy to actually pay for it.
One of the main reasons I want that ladder truck off.
Well, maybe we just need to get that ladder truck off. I mean, no, I'm dead
It still
serious.
bothers me. It still bothers me.
I know it does. And I just think at this point, we've spent an hour and a half talking about nothing. And I don't mean that to sound that. We talked about, we're not any further ahead now than we were when we started, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
We're not, but
Other than we may understand it a little bit more. But I think we need to somehow come to a happy medium and let the finance team recommend to us what we should be doing, because we are in unprecedented times and we don't know what tomorrow's going to bring.
Well, you have to remember, Janet, too, is that every year when you guys have been doing this.
Well, this is my first year, so cut me some slack here.
But in normal terms, if this was not happening, you'd still have to be making predictions and you'd still have to be making guesses.
Well, yes, I understand that, but we'd have a little better
But again, you have to make it based on best guesstimates, best information that's available. And I guess in the process is still all the same. So, I mean, it's just a matter of us now saying that we're not going to have all the local receipts.
Right.
or
Right,
state
that's-
revenue. So yes, there is going to be a shortfall. The question is like Stan is saying, is if he doesn't want to increase the taxes at all on people, then that means we have to look for it elsewhere. So that means no upping people's taxes 2.5%. But just also keep in mind that just because we don't use it this year does not mean it goes away. So
I know.
next year, whatever we don't use this year is still going to be there and available next year to be used.
Well, that's fine.
We
I
don't
mean,
have to use it then either.
unless
You're
of course,
absolutely
it's
right.
underwrite.
You also have to remember that things are still going to be increasing. So this is where that whole up and down thing is going to go, which is fine as long as we can prepare the taxpayers for the possibility that this is going to happen.
Or maybe we live within new growth. How about we try to budget within new growth? New growth and a reasonable amount of a tax increase.
Well,
and
you
say
have
that
to remember the majority of the new growth that we've received
Is done.
is already done, which means all the added expenses related to that new growth or new projects or new apartment buildings is now not going to be there. So these are the types of things that you have to take into consideration when you're looking at it. I'm not saying you have to, fund these items. You could say absolutely not. We're going to cut half the department. You can do that. But you have to also realize that that means you're cutting services, which you have to figure out which it is that's what the taxpayers want.
I guess it feels to me like town government should grow based on new growth, not necessarily on everybody's tax bill going up 2.5% every year.
New growth
Regional assessments.
and inflation.
Regional assessments are going to quickly outpace. In fact, we're seeing evidence of it already, are going to quickly regional assessment growth is going to quickly outpace our revenue growth. What do we do then?
Why is that?
Because we don't have control over regional assessment growth like we have control over municipal budget growth.
Well, why are they growing?
That's a question for the regional entities.
They're the schools, right?
Well, it's not just school, it's also
Dispatch,
primarily the schools.
Dispatch, yeah, and we have dispatch.
The dispatch district is another, the Worcester Regional Retirement is another. So we've got regional assessments that we have very little control over, and they are outpacing our ability to fund. We can still fund them this year, but we have to watch them. We're going to see this. I did a graph one time that it looked like a fish. I'll do it for you. It shows, it looked like a fish. It shows budget growth. It showed municipal budget growth. It showed regional budget growth. And you could see that there was a point at which regional budget growth outpaced, municipal budget growth and the town's ability to fund. And it became the fish's tail. The regional budget growth went up, the municipal budget growth kept on going down. So somehow there's got to be a balance. And I know I'm talking expenses at the moment, but it does tie into our revenues. It's going to come back to our ability to fund this growth.
And you also have to remember that a 1% increase on a larger portion of the budget is a lot bigger than a 1% increase if you have a smaller portion of the budget. So you can't always go by a percentage either. You have to look at dollars.
And then you come to the point where if you want to talk about those regional things, you've got to work with other finance committees to do it.
Yep.
That's correct.
If the Berlin Finance Committee and the Boylston Finance Committee can get together and convince their town meetings both to cut the amount, or to tell the school committee this is how much we can put up with for an increase this year, and then get the towns to both agree to it, the school committee gets cut. But that's the only way they get cut, is if you work in concert with the other towns.
My concern is,
Thank you,
and this
Mary.
is all still way up in the air, is what is going to happen with school in the fall? And we're still at Berlin Memorial down one teacher, one grade still has one teacher in it. I know that's not the norm, but it has been over the past year. If we go to limiting class size, that one class is not going to, you can't split kids out with one teacher, because the teacher can't clone herself or himself and be in another room. I'm really concerned about that.
Yes, and the same applies to regional transportation, because they are also talking about restricting capacity on school buses to a portion or a percent of the actual capacity of the school buses, which would mean more school buses running.
Or they're talking about splitting your day, which means you're running your buses twice instead of once, you know? So, I mean, there is so much up in the air. I mean, I read a really good article today, and I just like,
Are
Well,
those
I don't know.
actions at the state level that you're talking about for the schools?
Actually, it was the article I read was not written by a Massachusetts person, but you have to realize that you know, the Department of Secondary and Elementary and Secondary Education is, yes, that's Massachusetts, but the whole country kind of has to be run together, because these kids all then continue to promote, and then they end up in college. And if, you know, the standards aren't met, there just isn't equity in education. And that's, you know, that's on the federal level. So it's kind of a mixture of both, Barry, federal and state. I don't know. It's another whole subject. I think we need a motion to adjourn and come back and figure this
Have to
out.
do the transfers, please, before anybody adjourns.
Yes.
What
Yes.
do we have?
You have the end of year appropriation transfer for the ZBA part-time. I emailed this to the FinCom.
Yeah.
What were you holding up there?
This is the internal account transfer form. It's for ZBA part-time wages, and it's to be transferred from building inspector part-time wages, $675. The board approved this on Monday night, and it also requires FinCom approval.
ZBA is
Zoning Board of Appeals.
I know what it is. My question was, we're taking from ZBA to building, or building to ZBA?
From building to ZBA.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Mary, for putting that up.
Do you need a motion?
Well, that's why I was trying to get what it was, so someone could make the motion.
So move.
So 675 from building inspector
Part-time
wages. I'll just take a picture of that so that I can have it for later.
Oh, Janet, I put it in an attachment.
No, but then I gotta go back and forth. I got it. Oops,
Oh, okay.
I sent it to. All right, I got it.
So no progress on budget tonight.
Sorry.
Wait, let him finish making the
No, we need a second.
please. Sorry.
I have a motion to transfer from building inspector
Oh,
to
Mary,
ZBA
where
for
are you?
675.
She's not here, really? You're here, you can't do it.
I'm here. What do you need? Want to see it
No,
again? Hold on.
no, we lost a member.
Oh, that Mary is
Can
gone.
I second it? I can second it.
Mary.
Yeah, you better second it.
Not here.
Okay, we need a vote, Stan. No, we need a discussion. Anybody have any discussion?
You're doing Stan's job.
I know, but I'm trying to figure it out.
Muted himself.
Unmute,
He's
Stan,
muted.
unmute.
Oh. Stan,
I don't know how I got muted. I didn't mute myself.
You must have been swearing at the computer and it shut you down.
I would never do that, June. So does this dollar amount get them through the end of the year, or is this a temporary?
No, this should
Well,
get
we're at
through.
the end of the year.
The full year.
Yeah, we're at the end of the year. Okay. Do we have any further discussion on this?
Not I.
Not
Okay.
I.
All those in favor?
Janet, I.
Michael, I.
Did we lose Mary?
Yep.
Yeah, she's gone.
She doesn't appear to be here anymore.
Okay, Stan, I. We still have a quorum. We still
We
have
still have a quorum. We have three,
still have a
three
quorum, so
members.
we're
Yeah.
fine.
I'm gonna put, I'm just in case there's a question and why we weren't, because she's gonna be seen in the attendance. I'm just gonna say that Mary Porter lost connection.
Okay. This
She
would
believed to
typically
me he was
require,
supposed to.
this would typically require, I'm sorry, the form would typically require physical signatures, but I'm making record of this. And Janet, when the minutes are approved next time, we'll attach those to this form.
Here's Mary, can we?
Mary's back.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I was having a lot of trouble with my connection. I finally took it down and rebooted, and I'm back for however long.
Does somebody want to recap her?
Do you want to vote for the funds transfer that we just did?
Yeah, that's why I got back on. I knew we had that vote coming up, so.
So it's
Do you have-
unanimous.
Do you have any concerns about it, Mary?
No, not at all. Thanks.
Okay, can you give us an aye then?
Mary is aye. There you go.
So I got a 4-0 vote.
Excellent.
Okay.
Woohoo!
Hey, look at that, we accomplished something,
Thank you. Thank
Took
you.
a hell of a long time.
at least something.
Don't all leave yet. I gotta put in attendance because I didn't do this earlier.
So I trusted that you gentlemen resolved all your revenue questions in my absence.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
We're all set, right?
Well, my question,
Yep, clear
what is it that
as
we
a brick, no.
do so that we can help you guys to understand or to be able to have the information that you need to make decisions?
I can tell you that I, for one, would like a little primer on debt exclusion. And I don't know if June or Margaret, if I can reach out to you individually on that, or that would help me just kind of get more of a sense of this big picture that I tell you that I'm all about.
Okay.
Stan, is it also fair that you would like to keep the tax increase below 2.5%?
Yeah, as a stated goal, yes.
Okay.
What I struggle with is that, with all due respect, is that I don't feel like we get. I feel like we get a lot of it depends, and so I just worry that that's our goal, but it doesn't happen. And I know that that's out of people's control, but that is my goal, is to not have the tax bills go up more than 2.5%. Yes, and actually, my goal would have to, and maybe even not have them go up to 2.5. I'm not saying give a rebate, but maybe it's not even the 2.5. So I would like to see them either the same as last year or less, but not necessarily. That doesn't mean, well, the same tax dollar amount. Not saying that people have to be given a rebate, but maybe not have it be increasing.
Okay, because just keep in mind that even if we level funded everything that we possibly can, you still have increases in things like Worcester County retirement, the assessments, things like that. And we are getting hit with a decrease in state receipts and local. So for us to be able to level fund things, the taxes are definitely going to have to at least stay where they are and increase possibly just to offset those lost receipts.
Right, and I'm right. So that's, I guess, just part of what I really like to not have be the standard answer is let's raise taxes 2.5%.
No,
Just because we can doesn't mean we have to.
And you're absolutely right. In a perfect world, if everything else was level funded, it would be a lot easier to do that. This year, though, it's going to be a lot more difficult just because of the fact that we do have things that are out of our control. Like I said, as far as the Worcester County retirements, the assessments for the school, the assessments for dispatch, things like that are still going to be increasing where, like I said, we've lost local revenues. We're going to be losing state revenues. So just for dollar for dollar, if it's coming off of those revenues, and that means that the other revenues have got to go up a little bit just to level fund a baseline. So, but I understand what you're saying. I mean, we can do what we can do, but this
It would
year is,
appear to me that the only way, the ways you can do something about it is exactly two. One is to reduce expenses, and the other is to use more of your free cash.
correct.
So you won't be asking for as much tax money.
All right. Do you, well, I don't want to belabor the discussion tonight because I know everyone's tired, but just think back to remember the free cash guidelines that I presented really early on when you started meeting?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we need to be looking at those again.
Which is something that they're recommending, just because keep in mind, like Janet said, next year is going to be probably a lot worse than this year is. And we may not have free cash next year.
Exactly.
So,
and we may have to be,
exactly.
Tapping into stabilization next year.
Exactly.
So,
I mean, I get what Stan is saying and I understand where he's coming from, but I think, like Barry said too, we've got to kind of weigh things, and we don't want, unless it's going to be a permanent thing, as far as a big dip. I mean, keep our fingers crossed the malls come back and the world goes back to normal within a year or so. I know, Janet, I know, but it's one of those things where we're in it for the long haul, unfortunately, so.
Margaret, I know, and I'm gonna beat the dead horse, but the fire truck, would getting that off this year be helpful for next year? That's what
it would save about $4,000 in interest. It would take it off the tax levy completely because it's still on, and it'll be on next year too, and it'll save about $4,000 in interest.
Now, Margaret, are we taking that out of
Public safety mitigation?
Or are we actually taking that out of general fund money?
Public safety mitigation only. So
it would only be the interest that we would be saving then for next year.
That would be it. Yeah. And we'd also have to be counting on public safety mitigation funds coming in next year.
We don't know what's going to happen.
You know, we have them this year. Are we going to have them next year?
Right.
Well, that's why I'm asking you. So would it behoove us, since we have them this year, to use them to pay to get rid of that and be one less thing we have to worry about next year? That's what I'm asking.
Janet, you know, ask June. I have been struggling with this. I've been going back and forth and back and forth, trying to weigh the positives and negatives. I mean, on one hand, I would love to. I've struggled with, and Mary too. Mary knows that I've been struggling with this. But if we paid it off this year, that reduces the balance in the public safety mitigation funds to, it'd be about $28,000 is all it would be left, right? If we waited and paid it off next year, assuming we still had public safety mitigation funds, we at least have this reserve of public safety mitigation monies this year that if it needed to be tapped, it would be there. You know, if it needed to be tapped for something else that was urgent, we just don't know what that is. So that's, I mean, food for thought for the FinCom. I recommended on Monday night to the board. I had changed my prior recommendation and said, just pay it down 1 year, but I am totally open to reversing that and getting the thing paid off from public safety mitigation funds this year, understanding that there's going to be very little balance in that fund, $28,000, something like that remaining if we do it.
But that won't free up any money for this year to use it someplace else. So it's
no, it won't. Not unless it's not unless we appropriate from it.
So it'd be more just saving the interest for next year.
That's right. So
yep,
I'm happy.
That whole but
it's been tough. This whole thing has been just a huge juggling act. And you know, I guess I look at all the other towns.
speaking for me, I would say that the $4,000 savings is not enough to offset the keeping that money in the reserve. I mean, and for I know I say it's raining, spend the rainy day funds, but I think we should keep that money in there. I don't think that 4,000 does particularly that much for us.
It's not the money, it's not the money savings, it's the tax levy that's,
It wouldn't affect the tax levy per se, so.
It's just another expense on the budget that has to be paid for.
right, yeah, okay. Well, I know you've been struggling with it, so I just thought I'd ask.
It's a tough one. It would have been nice to get it off. Yeah, so that's where I stand. I guess my glass is half full after all this. You know, I have to say, you know, we are by no means alone. There are 351 cities and towns in Massachusetts right now that are struggling mightily with this. You know, this is unprecedented. I was just talking to a finance director in a town I used to work for. They're looking at a minimum of $3 to $6 million in cuts. Sure, they have a bigger budget, but they're looking at major cuts. So we're not in this alone. We're going to get through.
We're better than most too.
We are in better shape than most. We're going to get through this responsibly. And
So Margaret, should we be leaning towards then just working? Well, we still need to work on this, but do we really need to reinforce the fact that we need to start doing a month-to-month budget? So that way there, if we can't come up with something for town meeting?
Yeah, this is what we're struggling. Barry and I had a good conversation the other day. We were talking about, oh, what do we do? What are we going to put in the annual town report? This is what we're struggling with now. And so, yes, absolutely. We have to continue the month-to-month budget discussion. We have to.
Okay.
Because Stan, you know, I would love to be able to guarantee you that there aren't going to be changes to local receipts or more changes to state aid, but I can't guarantee that. And I'm fairly certain there are going to be.
Well, okay. I guess, yeah. Sorry, it's late and I'm cooked. So let's table this till next week, and I'll reach out to you or June, and we can talk about debt exclusion. But is there anything else we need to talk about this evening?
I would like to just add the fact that we're going to have moving targets all the time. From the time that we do adopt anything, there's still going to be moving targets until we do our recap sheet in the fall. We might very well be having another town meeting to deal with some special town meeting items that whatever we decide we have to do to change the budget or whatever in September or something. One of the things is you don't have to worry completely about anything that you decide now being final. But at some point, we will have to do something that's final in order to get a tax bill out in the fall.
Well, we've been talking about possibly doing estimated tax bills for the first round. So that way there we still have a cash flow, so we don't have to borrow money, because right now we're not asking for any interest in the budget to pay for any short-term borrowing. So I think that's the way we're going to probably lean this year. We've never done it before in the 30 years I've been here, but we're going to, I think, look into it because where Molly's doing the reval this year also, it just keeps snowballing for us this year as far as getting things done in a timely manner. So that, but again, setting the tax rate, once it's set, then there's no more changes for this year unless it's free cash. But again, the books have to be closed, free cash has to be certified, and there has to be a positive free cash to have it certified so that we can spend it at another town meeting. So just, unfortunately, there's no easy answer right now.
Molly, can you do estimated tax bills in a town that only sends out bills twice a year?
Yeah, we can do a preliminary.
Yes, what June said. The Board of Assessors has to take a vote on it, but other than that.
June, with that offer to do a primer, I went to that finance session last summer. You were there that the
Yep.
local services did, and so I have materials. But what I've never really looked at is a recap sheet. Is it possible for us on FinCom to have a copy of what you showed us?
Absolutely.
And I think then to follow along what we need to understand, it'd be helpful to actually have a set of numbers, an example of it,
Yep.
Certainly for me, it would.
Absolutely.
This is not easy. These concepts are not easy at all.
No.
Not even after 30 years.
It's actually worse now, I think, than it was way back when.
Oh my God, yes. Yes.
Because it would be really wonderful. I mean, Margaret has moved the expense part so far forward. It'd be wonderful to be able to wrap something up to have a town meeting, right?
Janet, you're muted. You're still muted.
No, Mike, I think we're all happier that way. It's okay.
Okay, I'll mute too.
And Stan wants to go to bed. I don't know.
Oh, yeah, yeah. All right, motion. Do we have a motion to adjourn, or are we?
Yeah, so moved.